Reading, despite being one of the four major skills of language learning, is one of the skills that is most often neglected by language learners. That is why some teachers use reading approach as one of the methods in teaching English. This approach is one way of solving students' reading problems. In this method, students are demanded to read more to improve their knowledge and get new ideas. Inferencing, guessing, and predicting are important skills developed in reading. By reading, students will know about different cultures by reading a cross-cultural understanding, and they will learn how to pronounce the words correctly. We all understand that there's so much going on in the world. When we slightly step backward or move a little bit slower, we may be left behind. No matter what kind of reading materials you're approaching, whether it's a newspaper in your hands or a kind of digital post, you'll probably save a lot of time when using skimming and scanning skills. Although these two techniques of reading have always been practiced by many people, some still find it quite difficult to tell them apart. So what are those kinds of techniques? Are there many differences between skimming and scanning? Let's imagine to better understand. Let's imagine reading as attending a buffet party. There are so many dishes nicely displayed. Skimming is when you take a look around and tell yourself, okay, this part is worth my next couple of hours. I'm going to stay here. Then, it's time for you to do the scanning job, selecting what to put in your dish because of the fact that you can't have them all. So it's the same thing with skimming and scanning. Skimming is a process of reading to get an overall view or get an impression of the content. This is when you pick out the main ideas or messages. Scanning, on the other hand, requires you to look for a particular word or phrase. You can totally ignore unnecessary ones. If you're reading, you must be having or about to have questions to be answered. So just wisely choose what to read and quickly get what may benefit. So when do we use scanning and when do we use skimming? The differences between skimming and scanning are crystal clear. Skimming helps you tell what the general information is, while scanning helps you position a particular piece of information. In fact, you have to understand your purposes of reading in order for you to apply a proper technique. So you have to be the most flexible reader you can become. The variability of the situations requires you to be adaptable. So, when do we use skimming? Skimming has always been one of the most selected ways when it comes to fast reading. Skimming can be understood as a technique of speedy reading wherein the reader pays attention to the main point or essence within the passage only, so as to get a general concept of the content. In skimming, the text containing unnecessary details, stories, examples, or other data is purposefully skipped. In other words, skimming does not require intimate reading, but it should be focused. Suppose you have to read an academic text and write an essay about its topic. Skimming can't do all the job as there is too much information. This skill would help when you're trying to find out if something is a waste of time or similar to something else you've already known. With skimming, a lot of time of the reader is saved because you don't have to spend hours to read the entire material in full. But this technique should not be applied every time, except you are in a hurry. However, it is also possible that when you skim a reading material, you skip the relevant points or misunderstanding something. So skimming can be used to take the overview of the chapter while reviewing for an exam, or take an overview of a book to decide if it's read-worthy or not. So when do we use scanning? To scan means to look for something. Scanning refers to a selective reading method generally used by the reader when he or she is in search of something specific, some specific information or text contained in the passage without reading the text thoroughly. Hence, when you scan some material, you already know what you're looking for. You just have to spot and sweep it down. It involves rolling the eyes over the study material until you locate the keywords or information of your need. It has more to do with searching rather than reading. Therefore, it can be said that scanning is a search-oriented reading process, which is used to find out answers to the specific questions. And once the answer is found, the reading process is over. So basically, when you perform scanning, there is a specific purpose or question at hand, and you go through with the given text so as to find the answer to that question and thus avoid reading the text which is irrelevant to your purpose or question. Despite all the differences between skimming and scanning, those two friends seem to be best together. They have been taught in almost every class of reading methods. This is because of the fact that practicing either of them can show great results. Basically, skimming tells you what information is contained in the section or in the document as a whole. In this, the reader runs his eyes quickly over the large chunks of material to pick the main points. On the contrary, scanning tells you where the information of your requirement is located in the text. Hence, one can skim the passage to understand its essence, whereas one can scan it to find certain words, numbers, dates, etc. Okay? Now let's talk about intensive and extensive reading. First, extensive reading. Extensive reading can be defined as a casual reading method performed for pleasure or gaining general understanding on a topic when the students are engrossed in the book, magazine, or newspaper. In this approach, students read long texts and refer to various supporting study material only to enjoy the reading and gaining a better understanding of the concept. That is why, for extensive reading, the readers look for easy, interesting, and amusing books, so as to improve their reading fluency and speed as well. The text is comparatively simple, containing a few unfamiliar words. The individual can select the book material of his choice on the topic that matches their interest. Further, there is no follow-up discussion to be held in class for what the students have learned during their reading. Extensive reading is just to encourage the habit of reading in students for pleasure and make them a voracious reader. Hence, it doesn't really matter as to whether the reader understands each word written in the text or not, to get the basic concept of the passage. In addition to these, the extensive reading method gives an opportunity to the students to read lots of material, which they select for themselves according to their reading speed and capability. So how about intensive reading? Intensive reading can be understood as the reading method which requires intimate study of a text with the objective of getting its literary or linguistic meaning. The readers are supposed to read the text with concentration and due care in detail as it has certain learning aims and tasks. Basically, it is the in-depth reading of a comparatively shorter piece of reading material to gain complete knowledge from it. It aims at identifying the answers to the questions of reading comprehension. Moreover, it can be used for the purpose of skimming and scanning and the concentration of the sentences. It involves an analysis of the text by the deconstruction of the sentences and looking over each word, phrase, and collocation which is not understandable with an aim of extracting the essence and meaning of the text as much as possible and learn the grammar and syntax rules. Further, the goals of intensive reading include understanding the gist and the subject matter of the text, improving grammar and vocabulary, and understanding the thought of the author behind the text. The main focus of the learner is on the language used rather than the text. In a nutshell, extensive reading is mainly used when an overall or superficial knowledge is required on a subject, as no focus is made on the detailed study. On the other hand, intensive reading is used when due attention is required to learn specific details about the topic or subject understanding. Now this time, let's put the skills into test. Let's read the story entitled Chechnya by Anthony Mara. But before that, can I hear your thoughts about this quotation from Plato? Only the dead sees the end of war. Yes, a war definitely ends eventually, but no one can never tell when the next war will begin. Even during times of relative peace, the form that peace takes is shaped by the ever-present threat of being plunged once again into a state of violence. This is what Plato meant that no one will see the end of war, only in death. Only those who have died are the only ones who don't have to fight the war anymore. Everyone else is destined to be a part of it as long as they are alive. So at this point, I'm assuming that you have read the story, okay? And now let's talk about it. First, let's discuss the elements, and let's begin with the setting. So when and where did the story happen? This story is set in Chechnya, okay, which explains the title. It's a rebellious Caucasus republic that broke away from Russia in 1994. And although the time is not specified, we can deduce that this happened when a war broke out. So the setting is in Chechnya during war. Now, who are the characters in the story? So we have Sonja, we have her sister Natasha, we also have heard of Ahmed and Hava. So Sonja is an ethnic Russian who trained in London and then returned to her homeland. During the war, she was running a local hospital. Okay, She has a sister named Natasha who just recently died, and we found that out at the beginning of the story. So, because of that, she spent most of her time in the local hospital. Then, at the last part, we have met Ahmed and Hava, right? So, Ahmed went to the hospital asking Sonja if they can stay in that hospital because the hospital is one of the secure places that they can stay in. Why? Because Hava's father has been taken away by the Russian troops, who have also burned her house to the ground. So she's only alive because of Ahmed, her neighbor, and her father's friend. Because Ahmed was able to spirit her out of her house in the middle of the night and hide her in his house. So Ahmed takes upon himself to protect Hava. So he went to the hospital where Sonja works and asked her to let Hava stay. Sonja agrees to shelter Hava on the condition that Ahmed, who trained as a doctor but is painfully aware of his inadequacies in the profession because he wanted to be an artist, stay and act as her assistant surgeon. So the hospital is barely functioning with little in the way of staff or supplies. So only the trauma and maternity wards are open. So this time is your turn. Think about the answer to these questions. I'm sure you will be able to find the answers by using our reading techniques. But before we end this video, let's sum it up. We have discussed 4 important terms. Skimming refers to reading rapidly for the main points. Scanning refers to reading rapidly through a text to find specific information required. Extensive reading is reading longer texts, often for pleasure and for an overall understanding. And intensive reading is reading shorter text for detailed information with emphasis on precise understanding. Although knowing the differences among these reading strategies is undeniably useful, the habit of reading every word may make some of us uncomfortable to change. To finally master the techniques of skimming and scanning, you have to spend your time practicing again and again. It's the act of allowing yourself to skip all the text but the ones that best match your purposes. Whenever you're in your best mindset, you're ready to speed up your reading process. So, just continue reading. Thank you so much for watching.